Okay. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this professional learning opportunity. I'm Jessica Roberts from NCEA, and I will be facilitating this webinar today. Just a few housekeeping notes as people are joining. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A or chat windows. We will be monitoring the windows for questions, and we'll try to answer them all in the allotted time. Within 24 hours of today's webinar, you will receive a link to the recording as well as an online survey. Once you complete the survey, a certificate of completion for the webinar will be emailed to you. Today's webinar is called Media Literacy, and it is being presented by Christina Jantra, Chief Navigator for Neptune Navigate. During the presentation, Christina will discuss media literacy skills to help students understand how media works, its impact on society, and how to consume, create, and share media in an ethical and responsible manner. Before I turn it over to our presenter, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Christ, our teacher, we thank you for the gift of Catholic schools, where the message of your life, death, and resurrection is proclaimed, discipleship is modeled, worship of you is cultivated, and community is experienced. Increase our zeal for ensuring that all children and families can benefit from an authentic Catholic education, and that Catholic schools grow in their ability to nurture the souls and form the minds of its students for generations to come. We ask all of this in your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Christina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It is so good to be back doing my second webinar with NCEA. You guys have been great hosts, and I hope today's topic is valuable to whoever decides to participate. So thanks. So, shall we get started?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead and take it away.
I'm going to share my screen. And look, I'm going to try really hard to, can you see my screen? Did that work well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. If you'll give me just a minute to organize my screen. So last time I did a webinar, I was traveling. So I was in a hotel, and I only had my laptop, and I wasn't in my home office and didn't have my two screens. And I don't know how your setup is, but I've gotten so used to having two screens that doing a webinar from one was very difficult. So I am more comfortable in this setting. So hopefully this will go even better than last time. But this is a topic that I am passionate about. I'm going to back up one slide because from the outset, I'm just going to go ahead and in the chat, I'm going to paste a link to my slides so that those who are online with us, they can have the slides already. But just know at the very end of my slides are all of my sources. So you can check my sources at the end, which I think is important for someone who's doing a webinar on media literacy. So as we begin, this is such an important topic, but let's start with a common vocabulary. So media literacy, as I see it, is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in a variety of forms. And so in the time that we have, we're going to focus on two aspects: analyze and evaluate. Because look, let's be honest, our kids and us, we have no problem accessing media in a variety of forms. So I don't think we need even any direct instruction, maybe a little, but no real time spent on how to access information, because it is just by being alive in the year of our Lord 2023, information is just coming at us from all sides. So access, we won't focus much time on, but we will spend the bulk of our time on analyze and evaluate, and also create creating media would take a whole nother hour or two of our time. So what I want to focus our attention on is analyzing and evaluating. So to start us off, if there's anyone with us, the question I would ask you is, where do you get your news from? Where, and has that changed over time? I am proud to say I'm 56 years old, and where I access my news from has changed dramatically over the course of my life. So when I was growing up, I grew up in Dallas, suburbs of Dallas, Texas. And in Dallas, growing up, we had three channels on our television: ABC, NBC, and ABC, NBC, CBS. And we were avid ABC News household. We watched our ABC local news. I grew up with those people. I feel like those news anchors from that time are part of my childhood. I can still name you all of those news anchors. And we received at home the Dallas Morning News in the mornings, and the Dallas Times Herald, I think it was called, in the afternoon. We got the physical newspaper. And so that's where we got our news from. And we trusted those news sources. But times have changed. So here is a recent statistic. It's last year's results. So 2022, Statistia found that here's what the landscape looks like now. And what I want you to consider first is, if you look at the left hand of that graph, newspapers are only really being read with any regularity. 21% of people in the age group of 65 or above are getting their news from newspapers. And you'll see 35 to 44-year-olds, only 9% are getting their news from newspapers. And so that news source is dying right before our eyes. What I want you to focus on is what I think is most important, and that is this right here: social media. 35 to 44-year-olds say they're getting 44% of their news from social media. But more shockingly is the 18 to 34-year-olds. 18 to 34-year-olds get most of their news from social media. It's growing. We spend so much of our time there. It shouldn't be any surprise that that's where we're getting it from. But because that's where so many of us are getting our news, I think that's why, at least in my opinion, I believe that's why teaching media literacy is so vastly important now, because we need to have the skill and the tools with us so that when we're getting our news from social media, we know how to analyze and evaluate our sources. And the reason for that will become more clear as we move on. I ran across this, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Pamela Myers in 2011, which was, if you think back, 2011, Instagram was only a year old. So that's like a million years ago in social media time. But she has a book out, and she did a TED Talk, and there's a link in the slides. I'll link it in the chat for anyone who is interested, just so we have a record of it. But she did a TED Talk on lie spotting, on how to tell if you're being lied to, some just key tools that you can use when you're being lied to by someone face to face. And I found it fascinating, the concept behind it. But one of the things she says in her TED Talk is that if you don't want to be deceived, you have to know what you're hungry for. Okay. If you don't want to be deceived, you need to know that needs to be your motivator, if my motivator is, when I'm on social media, I don't want to be deceived. I need to know and acknowledge what I'm hungry for. So let's think back to the pandemic. What I was hungry for was knowing what I could do to keep myself and my family healthy and safe. That's what I was hungry for. And so if that's what I'm hungry for, knowing that will motivate me to evaluate and analyze whether or not the sources I was getting my information from were reliable. But also what I need to be aware of is confirmation bias. Are you familiar with that phrase, confirmation bias? So confirmation bias is our tendency to cherry pick information that confirms our existing beliefs. And here's where that's important when we're living our life on social media, is that we're not getting, we're getting a very curated bits of information. Here's what that means. You might be familiar with the term filter bubble. Filter bubble was a phrase that was made popular by another TED Talk by a guy named Eli Parsier. And he, man, it's a great TED Talk. And I'll try at the end to share a link for that, but you can just Google it, filter bubble TED Talk. And what Eli explained so beautifully in his TED Talk and then in his follow-up in his book was that algorithms are editing the information that we get online. He introduced it based on Google. So Google takes, when I do a Google search of anything, the information that it gives me is not just giving me all the information that's out there. Let's just say, if I'm going to do a Google search of confirmation bias, if I want to learn everything I can about confirmation bias, and I go to Google and I type in confirmation bias, the results it gives me, it's not going to be everything that's out there on the internet. Google, by their algorithm, is going to edit what I see. So I am in Tyler, Texas, and I am doing my search on a PC in my home, which it knows where my house is. It's going to give me results that it thinks I want to see based on my search history. I'm not seeing everything. So I need to be aware of that I'm not seeing a whole picture, that I need to do my work to find information from both sides, because there's always two sides to every search. But keep that in mind as we move forward, that searching will give us some information, but not all information. We have to do some extra work. So moving on, here's an example on social media of how we're being lied to. Okay, so this top picture, actually both of these pictures are from a documentary on that was on HBO Max called Fake Famous. The first one is how pictures deceive us on social media. So the top picture is how you can fake your followers out by making them believe that you are on a plane traveling to somewhere exotic. It's a toilet seat that they're holding up. In front and behind the toilet seat is a picture of a plane wing in the sky. Look how easily we can make people believe that we have taken a trip or that we are on an airplane going somewhere. And the picture that results from this was very believable. The other image is of a private plane movie set that you can rent in LA for not a lot of money. And this set has been used multiple times by Instagram influencers to make their followers believe that they're have access to a private plane. What is the purpose of me showing you this? My purpose is to make us, one, aware, to make our students aware that we are easily deceived by images, that we have to ask more questions about the images that we're seeing. And in a minute, I'll show you one way that we can do that. So MIT Sloan researchers in 2018 studied falsehoods on social media, and they found that falsehoods are 70% more likely to be shared than truth. For that is, when we see something online, first of all, just sharing things online is so fast and easy. So fast and easy. I mean, it's one click and I can share something that gets an emotional response. And that's one of the reasons I think why falsehoods are 70% more likely, because they are shocking, they are new, they get an emotional response from us. And so that's one of the reasons that leads to this. And this statistic from that same report, and the link to this report you'll have in my slides, but they found that false news reached its first 1,500 people 6 times faster than the truth. Think about that. We are being on social media, we are seeing more incorrect information faster than true information, which is for us as adults, we have the maturity and the fully functioned brain to slow down and ask questions, to analyze and evaluate our sources. We have that advantage over our students whose brains aren't fully developed, who don't have those breaks, internal mental breaks that say slow down when you see something that elicits an emotional response. And so that's why I think that's why it's so important that we take time with our students to teach these skills. Because look, I was a librarian, and you can go to your school libraries right now and see on the wall in big, huge letters, the nonfiction section and the fiction section. I love this picture, easy fiction. That's what I'm drawn to, easy fiction. I don't want to have to think. But on the internet, that's not possible. We don't have those designated spaces. It's all thrown at us. And we have to determine with our own skills and ability, which areas to place information. Does it go in the fiction section? Does it go in the fiction section? Is it nonfiction? Is it fiction? And we're constantly having to be making those determinations. And that is so hard because of the amount of information that's coming at us and how quickly information is shared. And if you were with us on the last webinar that I did, I used this example because it illustrates so well how quickly things spread online. This was, if you recall, the 2009, the Miracle on the Hudson, and Giannis Kroons was on the Staten Island ferry. He took this picture, he tweeted it out to his 170 followers. This was true, this was accurate information. He shared it with his 170 followers, and within an hour, it had been retweeted 4.9 million times. That's how fast news travels on the internet. That's how fast true news travels and false news travels. And look, as we set out on developing these skills, I want to remind you that this isn't new. This isn't new. This, as long as we have been able to share information, we have shared truth and we have shared misinformation. And I ran across this story about our first president, George Washington. So George Washington in 1791 traveled to Augusta, Georgia. Now, what you could do with your students is ask this question. Ask them, did George Washington, did his dog die in Augusta, Georgia? Now, that seems like an odd question, but it is a rumor that has been spread and spreading since 1791. So here is a screenshot of an article from the Augusta Chronicle. This was printed in 2016, and you'll notice the line that I have highlighted, which says, sadly, at some point, Washington's beloved greyhound Cornwallis died and was buried in Augusta. Well, I ran across this when I was reading Nathaniel Philbrick's book, Travels with George. Philbrick, during the pandemic, decided to follow Washington's a tour that Washington took through the country during his, I think it was his second, it may have been his first time as president, that he went and visited the states because it was the 1700s. He had been elected in 1789, and so this was his first trip through the states, visiting the country, because he wanted to see his fellow countrymen in all of their various contexts. And this rumor got started, and Nathaniel Philbrick took his dog with him because he had heard that Washington had carried his dog with him. And Philbrick gets to Augusta, Georgia, and he starts doing some searching and asking questions about this illustrious story of Washington's dog dying. And here is the lesson. What Philbrick finally did was he wanted to go back to the original source, and that's the key that we need to teach our students. Is when you find something online, you need to go and see if you can find the original source. And so Philbrick did. He went and found the very first news article he could find that mentioned this event of the president's dog dying in Augusta, Georgia. And you know what he found when he looked really closely? The original article was written on April 1st. Let that sink in. It was an April Fool's joke. It wasn't true. And yet it has been spread. 2016, it was still being told in newspapers. People still believe it. Why? Because they didn't, one, go back to the original source, and they didn't look to see what was the purpose of this article. It was not to inform, it was to entertain. So I don't know how a story about a dog dying was entertainment, but nonetheless, think back. Today is, I had to look at my watch to see, April the 20th. So 20 days ago, when we once again found ourselves awake and alive on April 1st, social media was full of all kinds of April Fool's jokes. And if we're not careful, what we do is we keep sharing those, and we forget to look and see that they originated as April Fool's jokes, which go back even to 1791. So that is a warning for your students. As I said before, if the definition of media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in a variety of forms, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time teaching our kids how to access it. They walk around with smartphones that give them access to more information than our ancestors had in their lifetime. One part of accessing media that I think is vitally important, and that is Googling better. I think we've assumed that students, well, just consider this. When you open up Google, it seems so simple. There's just that window to enter our search. It seems pretty straightforward. It's very intuitive, and yet I still see people today entering full-blown sentences with capital letters and punctuation at the end, in spite of the fact that's not how Google works. That you get better information if you are careful about the words you put in that search window. So I think, and I'm going to put in the chat a link to a great PDF that you could share with your students on how to Google better. And it's a free resource that comes from our friends at News Literacy Project, the News Literacy Project. If you're not following them, and I encourage you to do so. But one of the things I think we could teach our students to do better is to use operators. And by operators, I mean quotation marks, minus symbol. Often you might find a need for them to just find sources from .edu sites. So a .edu site, is a site that is only from institutions of higher learning. Colleges and universities have can use that .edu domain. And so you can limit your search using a site operator. And so let me give you an example of what that can look like. So if you wanted to find out information of the Battle of the Boot, the Battle of the Boot was a battle that took place in World War I, as the title indicates, it was a battle that took place in Italy. And so if I just go to Google and search Battle of the Boot, just those words, I'm going to get, and you can see there, my first result, I'm going to get 114 million results, which Google likes to celebrate how many results they can give you. But who has time? What student has time to go through 114 million results? And you'll notice the first several are in reference to a football game. I don't need information about a football game. So I'm going to use those search operators. And so if I just put quotations around the Battle of the Boot, I've reduced my number of results. I still have football games. And so I'm going to use a minus sign. So now if I put quotations around Battle of the Boot, because I want Google to go out and find information that has those words in that exact order, but I'm going to say minus football, and then I'm going to put in quotation marks WWI, World War I. I end up now from 114 million results to 7,000 results, and you'll see those first few results are of the World War I battle that I'm wanting information about. And I will tell you, this is from trial and error. And you can do this with students. And I would encourage you to do this with students in class. If I were in class, here's my free idea for the day. If I were teaching in class today, I would, in every class, because almost all our schools are one-to-one, I would always assign one student the role of the Googler. That's what I would call them. I would call them the Googler of the day, and I would rotate that position every day. I mean, think back to elementary school, how you would have the caboose and the leader. Those were roles that you would have every day. I would, junior high, maybe fifth grade and on, I would have a Googler assigned every day. And I would try to make an effort that every day in class, we would Google something that related to whatever we were doing in class. How many times has a student raised their hand in class and asked a question that you just off the top of your head didn't know? It happens to all of us. So when those times happen, I would say, look to the Googler and teach through that moment. So if I'm teaching on George Washington, and one of my curious students said, did George Washington have any pets? I could see a fifth grader wanting to know that. I would ask the Googler, Google George Washington pets. Those are our key words. And I would say, put quotation marks around George Washington and put pets. And then we would from that, ask what information the Googler finds. And here's your teaching moment. Your teaching moment is when the Googler gives you an answer, then you quickly ask these questions. Where did you get that info? Tell you the web address. And then you would follow it by saying, what makes this web address, what makes this an authority on this topic? And you have a quick discussion about that. That's how we can teach our students in real time how to analyze and evaluate their sources. I hope that's helpful. I hope that's maybe something you'll try with your students. This is, I call, a power search tool. Hopefully you're familiar with it. If you're not, I would take a picture of it, of this slide, once you have these slides, and I would print it out. In my library, I had this picture of a control key plus the F key, and I framed it in my library because it is a power tool. So what it does is it allows you, if you're on any website, if you hit Control F, or if you're a Mac person, Command F, you can put a search particular words. So let's go back to our example of, did George Washington have pets? If I find a website, for example, the Wikipedia site on George Washington, I Control F or Command F and I type in pets, it will quickly highlight anywhere on that site where pets are mentioned. And so I can quickly move through there and see if that site addresses pets. And if it doesn't, I know I don't need to spend time there. I can move on. So Command F or Control F, that is a power tool that students don't have to scan or skim through a whole article. They can let the technology do that for them. If you're not using that tool, start using it and share it with your students. Now, remember the example I gave you before of the fake pictures, the picture that the influencer was taking, looking through a toilet seat to make it look like it was an airplane window. Well, this image you can see is of a shark swimming on the highway. And here's the thing with this shark picture. Anytime there is a hurricane, this picture ends up being shared on social media. It resurfaces hurricane after hurricane. And so what I would encourage you to do, excuse me, is share this picture. Take this picture and ask your students, is it real or fake? And you can do that by teaching them how to do a reverse image search. A reverse image search is a tool and a skill that we need as people living in 2023. We need this skill. And so our students need it as well. And you can do it, reverse image search with that image of the swimming shark. And all you do is go to Google. Have you noticed this picture, this little camera on your Google image search window? It is valuable. When you click on it, this is what you get. You get this window, and you can drag, save an image and drag it and drop it here, or you can put in the web address of that image. So I did that with our shark image, and here's what you get. You get all the places, and this is a long, this image has been shared so many times. And what do you need to notice right off the bat? Fake, viral hoax. There are no sharks swimming in Irma's floodwaters. That was Hurricane Irma. It goes all the way back to Katrina. It was shared. So many times, but you can see, is this image something I can trust or not? Show your students how to do this. It is a skill that will serve them well, and you as well. I mentioned a minute ago Wikipedia. So I hope we are past the days where we just say don't use Wikipedia with our students. I think we do them a disservice when we do that, and I'll explain why. But what I like to ask students to do is to Google 3 random things. Here are 3 random things that you can Google if you'd like to play along at home. Google butterfly, Google George Washington, and Google daylight savings time. When you do that with your students, you will see that those 3 random topics have something in common. In the top 3 results, you will find a Wikipedia result. And so talk about that with your students. What does that mean? How does that happen? And what do we think about Wikipedia? So Wikipedia is the world's largest encyclopedia. We have, as a people, tried to put all of our knowledge in one place. So it is open source. We should talk about that with our students. What does that mean? That means that we can all contribute to Wikipedia. But that also means that there are times when the information we find on Wikipedia is not accurate. Now, one way that Wikipedia is incredibly valuable is when you pull up a Wikipedia site, let's say on George Washington. I always tell my students, scroll all the way down to the bottom and look at the sources. There are some great sources. There are some primary sources there. There are some secondary sources there. That is a great place to start your research, is to find sources on Wikipedia. And look, research and studies have been done on the accuracy of Wikipedia. And you can Google this yourself. Google Wikipedia accuracy, and then Google World Book Britannica accuracy. And they have about the same grade of accuracy. And so the beauty of Wikipedia over our print or traditional encyclopedias is that Wikipedia can be constantly updated, whereas our print cannot. So if you're working on an old World Book Britannica issue, you might find things that are outdated. But when we're talking about Wikipedia, I would love for you, as you teach your students about Wikipedia, I'd love for you to use this example. This is the best example I've ever run across. This is the Wikipedia page on regarding the best Christmas pageant ever. At the school where I last worked, our fourth graders, right before Christmas break, the fourth grade teachers would read this book aloud to our students. So our high school students were well aware of the best Christmas, it's hard to say, the best Christmas pageant ever. So this was a Wikipedia page that I found on many years ago on the best Christmas pageant ever. And I took a screenshot of it and I saved it. And I'm so grateful because it makes our point so well. So look at the entry for the best Christmas pageant ever. It says it's a book written by Barbara Robinson. They got that part right. That is true. I can look at the cover of the book and that is true. And then it says a book written by Barbara Robinson in 1972. Now there's our first problem. If you look down on the page, it says the publication date was 1971. So already we have some inaccurate information, but that's not where it stops. It says it was written by Barbara Robinson in 1972 and again 4 years later. That is unclear. Did she write it once or did she write it twice? Actually, I think the 4 years, I think it's just a poorly written sentence that she did a sequel 4 years later, but it gets worse. It tells the story of 625 children, Lake Herdmans. Now, it is a story of the Herdman family. The Herdmans, God bless them, did not have 625 children. They had 6 children. I only remember one of the kids' names, Imogene, because I thought that was such a strange name. But they had 6 children. It goes on. The 625 children who were poorly shaved and not exposed to Churchillian matriculation systems. They go to church for the first time merely because they found out snacks were being offered at Sunday school. Instead, they find themselves buried in lead mines. Now, none of that is true. And I will say that if you go and look up today, the Wikipedia page has been corrected. So my lesson to students is this: be careful on Wikipedia because what you find may not be accurate. And if you find something that's not accurate and you can prove it's not accurate, you can create yourself a login for Wikipedia, and you could go in and you could edit that page yourself, which brings me to my best idea for Wikipedia, and that is this. If you want to teach your students really how they can analyze and evaluate well, here's what my best Wikipedia idea, and it's this. As you go through your curriculum, look for something that you are going to go deep, a topic you're going to go deep on. Maybe it is George Washington, and you and your students become experts after you have gone through a whole unit on George Washington or on the American presidents. You become an expert on a topic. Go to Wikipedia, pull up that page, if there's a page on that topic. If there's not a page on whatever topic you choose, maybe you as a class, you create a page where you put down all the information that you've learned. And then you monitor that page. And as people come to it and make edits or add to it, your students can analyze and evaluate that information. Is it what has been added by other Wikipedia editors? Is it true and accurate? And if it is, you learn more. But the idea is that you become an expert on a topic and then monitor a Wikipedia page and evaluate the accuracy of the page and have students. I mean, that could be an assignment for a student to find information on a Wikipedia page that they are an expert on that topic and find an inaccuracy and have them explain and support why that's an inaccuracy, and then help them maybe as a class go in and edit that Wikipedia page. That would be a great use of Wikipedia, a great way that Wikipedia could be a learning tool. Let's quickly, in the time that we have left, look at some research. In 2016, Stanford, the Stanford History Education Group, which goes by the acronym SHEG. SHEG researched, they did a great service to us educators. They did a deep research on people's ability to judge the credibility of information that they find online. And this sentence from their research, I think, should motivate us to spend time with media literacy with our students, because what they found, and they tested junior high students, high school students, and college students, and all of them, they found, when it comes to evaluating information that flows through social media channels, they, our digital natives, our students, are easily duped. And look, I don't think that any of us want that for our students. That's not the portrait of the graduate we want coming out of our schools. We don't want them to be easily duped. We want them to know truth when they see it and be able to find truth when they're looking for it. And so I'm going to give you 3 examples from SHEG on how they tested students. Here's the first one: just analyzing a website. Simply analyzing a website. So what they asked them to do from this Slate website was to identify 3 things. Identify native advertising, and that is new advertising. That is advertising that's made to look like a news article, that is made to blend in with the rest of the website, so that you don't immediately acknowledge it as being advertising. They were supposed to identify native advertising, traditional advertising, and a news article, and they couldn't do that from this website. So this first example, so this first box, number 1, that was traditional. That's just traditional advertising. That is pretty easy to spot. And then they were asked to identify this article here. That is an actual news article. And then this here, even though it says sponsored content, students did not, with great accuracy, could not identify this as sponsored content or as native advertising. That's a problem when our kids can't tell the difference between news and advertisements. Let's look at the next one. Again, sponsored content. This is from Entrepreneur Magazine's online article. What they found was 80% of students identified sponsored content as news. And I think you see the problem with that. 80%. So how do you handle this in class? In class, you could just pull up a website and go through kind of like a Where's Waldo experience. Instead of finding Waldo, you're trying to find real news articles or advertisements. What are advertisements? What are news articles? What is just straight clickbait? Here's another one that they use. This picture, now remember, we just looked at Google image, reverse image search. So students were given this web post with a picture, and it purported to be flowers that had grown after the I think you might remember in 2011 there was the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan had a meltdown, and this picture was circulated around social media purporting to be picture, the result of this nuclear spill. And so the students were asked, did this post provide enough evidence to be believable? 40% viewed it as trustworthy. And all you had to do was do a reverse Google image search to find out that this was a hoax, that this was fake. And so here's our third example. This was a Twitter post by moveon.org, and college students were asked why this tweet why it might be useful or might not be useful as a source of information. And here's what they found, that less than half noted how the political agenda of moveon.org might influence this information. And here's what they were missing. They didn't understand bias. They didn't ask those important questions of what might be moveon.org's bias on this topic. Now, and we don't have time to spend on it, but bias doesn't mean not true. It just can inform you on what a slant a group might have on a particular topic. And I just looked at the clock and we're running out of time, so I want to go over this last piece quickly. One of the tests to evaluate and analyze information that has been used for years and years. I used it with my students for years, and it has the most unfortunate, why we never could come up with a better acronym, I don't know, but it has the unfortunate acronym of CRAAP. And you know, I assume you know that it stood for C, currency. Is the information current? That is important. That is important. Is it relevant? R, is it relevant to my topic? Authority, and this is the one where we didn't do our best on this one. Authority, where we would have students ask, what makes the author or the owner of this website an authority? And what we would ask them to do is to look for the About Us link on the website. Let the author tell you that they're an expert. Well, the problem with that is, of course, they're going to tell you they're an expert. They're not going to tell you what their bias is. So we were getting limited information. From there, we went to accuracy. Is the information supported by accurate evidence, and then purpose? What was the purpose? This is still a great question to ask. What's the purpose? Is it to inform, entertain, persuade, or sell me something? A better tool to use, a better skill to use, rather than the CRAAP test, is lateral reading. I'll quickly explain it in the time that we have. Lateral reading is not where you go to the About Us tab and have the source tell you that they're reliable. Instead, it is to literally read laterally, open another tab and search out and find out what on your own if that author or owner of that website is reliable. Here's my best example. I wanted to understand NFTs, non-fungible tokens. I wanted to understand what that meant. And so I Googled NFT explained, and I got this result. And the title was great. NFT explained in simple language. Thank you. That's what I needed. But when I asked myself, who owns this? It was a blog post by someone named Armand. When I went to see who Armand was, I could find no information. So I didn't know if Armand was an expert on NFTs. So I went and looked for another source, and I found this source, this article, Non-Fungible Token Bible, everything you need to know about NFTs. And I was like, yes, please, thank you. That's exactly what I need. So I look at the author, Devin Finzer. I open up another tab and I Google Devin Finzer. And I find out this, that Devin Finzer, according to Forbes magazine, who I consider to be a trusted source, because it's a trusted source, and they tell me that he's a CEO of OpenSea, which is a marketplace that sells NFTs. I think that makes him an authority on NFTs. That's how you do lateral reading, where you open up tabs and you go look and ask other sources to tell you, is this person an authority on our subject? But look, here's what all this means. All this means is that we have to slow down in our research, that we have to ask questions, that we have to open up other tabs, that I don't just see a post on social media and get an emotional response and immediately share it. I ask questions. I do some more research. I try to verify. I try to go back and find the original source real fast in the time that we have. I'm just going to give you this one example. I kept seeing over and over news that our attention span as humans has shrunk to the size of goldfish. I didn't realize that goldfish had a short attention span, but what I kept reading was that our attention span was shrinking. I'm going to put it in the chat. Here's an article, and this is a BBC article where they actually did some lateral reading. They went to try to find the original source on this idea that says, if you're looking on the screen from Digital Information World, that they say in their infographic in the year 2000, humans had the attention span was 12 seconds, and just 15 years later, it's reduced to 8.25 seconds, which apparently they say is less than the attention span of a goldfish. And here's the problem with that. When BC went and tried to track down the original article, where did this come from? They found that it was a 2015 article reported by Consumer Insights by a team from Microsoft. They had surveyed 2,000 Canadians, and they had analyzed the brain activity of 112 people, and that's where this information came from. But when the BBC went back and asked the Canadian Microsoft researchers, where did you get this information about goldfish? How did you make that connection? They said, we got it from Statistic Brain. They had done their research. So when they went to Statistic Brain, they couldn't find anything that validated this notion that goldfish had a larger attention span than humans did. And so it, like the rumor about George Washington's dog dying and being buried in Augusta, Georgia, was just a rumor, inaccurate information that seemed interesting because it got us an emotional response, and it just kept being shared. It was shared in the New York Times. It was shared in Time Magazine, but it was inaccurate. So that does it for us. My resources are in the slides. They're in the chat. I worried at the beginning of this, Jessica, that we would not be able to go enough. I would not have enough content for a full hour. And look, I had more than enough.
Yes, we will go ahead and also include those resources along with the webinar when we send out all of the link to those that are here listening with us. And thank you, Christina, so much for being a part of this. We really appreciate having you on the webinar today.
Thanks. It was so good to actually see you again.
Yes,
after meeting you in person.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to all the attendees watching now and those that watch in the future. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Jessica. Bye.
Bye.